Welcome everyone to MOCA Live. It is another Wednesday. It is another Wednesday evening. It is another MOCA Live podcast. It is 11:01 p.m. here in beautiful Paris, France. My name is Max Cohen. I will be your host for the MOCA Live podcast today. Thank you so much for being here. We have two guests with me today who I am just tickled pink to talk to. These are two folks who, as I've been researching them more and more, have just completely fascinated me. The character of their work, their actual character, in their kind of whole ethos is a lot of things that, especially if you watch or listen to the show, you know that I hold near and dear about crypto art and especially AI art, open source tool creation, like ingenious use cases, application of new technology to the past. I'm really excited to talk to our guests today, so let's just get right to them. That would be AI artist, NYU professor, and founder of Eden, Gene Kogan. So, Gene, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. And then it's street artist, AI artist, activist, founder of Little Martians, and much more, Vanessa Rosa. Vanessa,
Hey,
thanks so much for being here.
thank you for having me.
Cool. So let's just get right to it because I have so much to ask you both about, and I'm really excited for this conversation. So, when I asked you both what you wanted to talk about today, Vanessa, you were very quick to note that you wanted to talk about merging traditional crafts with AI and how important it is right now. Can you talk about like why that felt like the topic of the moment for you and like why it feels so important?
Well, I guess we all know that there has been a clash between even digital artists, traditional artists with AI, and for very understandable reasons. I think this will impact not only artists, but every profession, right? Like how um, we're all creating data, we're making data available online, and people didn't even know that what AI was capable of, or how it's trained, or where it comes from. So it looks like an alien technology, and also looks like it's like we're creating this beautiful collective intelligence, this fascinating technology, and there is a preoccupation of how this will impact people's livelihoods and how connected they feel to it, how they can understand it or not, or also having AI as mostly sponsored by big tech,
Mm.
and who gets to profit from it. So there are a lot of conflicts, and also as a traditional artist, as someone who just is fascinated with drawing and painting, etc., I I really think it's important to, you know, merge your own technique, merge your love for drawing back into the AI, and
Mhm.
have an incentive system for people to continue to make new image, continue to just do it out of joy, and be for the reason we've been doing painting since ever, right?
Mhm.
Like, painting has changed a lot ever since photography. Like it is not it's like the role of painting in society has been changing for a very long time. It's not like AI is a first big blow. Is like if you are deep into the painting world, they can be very reactionary too, of always
Mhm.
being like afraid of Photoshop, afraid of collages, afraid of there's so many debates. And yet I actually feel very inspired by all the new things we can do with this, like the whole art of world building, of generative storytelling, of being able to do things with your hands, and then you create an AI entity with based on that object, on that sculpture. So I actually think it's super inspiring, and I want my take is like to inspire artists to try to learn as much as possible about AI, and also to put the energy into open source AI, democratize AI, that that we all like try to make our lives better with this kind of new knowledge.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting points. Also, because I think, kind of for the first time, at least to my knowledge, you don't really need specialized training to be able to access, especially if you're a traditional artist, the kind of like evolutionary effects that AI is going to be able to have on your work. So people, even outside of the art world, even outside of the tech world, are able to bring AI into their practices for the first time. My follow up question to you is, how does somebody who has a background in traditional arts, maybe is dabbling in AI for the first time, how do you bring it into your practice, and how do you specifically bring it into your practice in a way which like elevates the work that you do, but not so much that it consumes your work within the AI? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there are many different approaches. I've been doing 3D scanning of my sculptures and then using different AI techniques for animation. So like 3D techniques as well. But then using image generators, you can use initial image. So that's very powerful and has been available since the beginning. Well, at least for a couple of years. But otherwise, you can train custom models based on your image. And now with Eden, like what I've been enjoying a lot is the custom training. So you train Laura's with very few image. With 10 image of a sculpture, I'm capable of creating a character, creating a concept that we call like a Laura concept. And then I can insert that sculpture in all sort of different situations. Like
Mm.
even within my own photos, I can use photos as initial image again, or paintings as initial image. So the level of combinations we can do and how like um, personal you can make the workflow is fascinating. And of course, like there are many different approaches to it. Someone like Gene, he can talk more about it, that has more of a colder approach to it, will have many different tools. He'll play in a different way, and that's why it's so fun that we get to explore together. Like I always enjoy seeing what he does, especially in terms of generative storytelling, and then I try to adapt my world to it.
Yeah, for sure. Gene, I'm going to ask you in a second more about like open source AI creation, because it's like I think kind of the question of the moment. But this question of like the importance of self-training your own models and having kind of control over data sets, and being able to tailor make these models to your experience or what you're hoping to get out of an artwork. Like I spoke about that with Linda Dunya some months ago. She's the brilliant AI artist, and I feel like I keep seeing it everywhere, especially in this dichotomy between more, I guess, in the conversation, the cultural conversation, even within crypto art, about AI art, and still kind of holding on to this idea that so much AI art is stock or feels uninspired or rote, or I guess like a mimicry of the aesthetics of the model that's being used, whether it's Midjourney, Dali, the big models. I'm actually seeing it, I feel like, less and less myself now that open source models are kind of starting to come more into vogue. Gene, can you talk about, I mean, open source models in general, but like also Eden, the importance of artists discovering for themselves like the workflows to build these models?
Yeah. Well, yeah, kind of just building on what Vanessa said. I've been, really interested in AI as a way of, amplifying and, stirring up my own creativity and other people's. It's just a very powerful, very general purpose tool. I sort of have this feeling that you solve intelligence and you can use that to solve everything else. It's a quote that I really enjoy.
Mm.
And so I've been just kind of pretty committed to that path for a long time, and Eden is just kind of an outgrowth of that in this time and moment. It's really important, as Vanessa said. It's going to really radically change the way that a lot of media is produced and consumed and disseminated. And I think traditionally, the people that we call artists have a large influence on that, and can have a large influence on this kind of phase as well.
When you're like, either in lectures or just in your daily life, like preaching the gospel of open source, like AI modeling, do you tend to come at it more from an like aesthetic angle, like it's important for evolving aesthetics, or are you more in the kind of like free speech, freedom of privacy kind of worldview? Or maybe that's not necessarily a difference that I even need to make.
I don't know if there's a dichotomy between those things, like aesthetics. So for me, the interesting thing is the process, the learning, the knowledge, the sort of what it means to mop up all this data and learn something from it. I was struck kind of when you were talking about how, everything, has a particular look, sort of seems kind of generic, the mid journey look or something like that. And it's kind of, it's sort of in a sense, a feature, not a bug in that it's
Mm-hmm.
learning from everybody in a sense. And so it really kind of, zooms in on the center of gravity of our culture. And it's actually, the challenge now is to kind of get outside of that, to go to find aesthetics that don't feel like that they just naturally kind of came out of, that they're resampling something that we've seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I would maybe pause there for
Sure.
clarification.
So correct me if I'm wrong. You've been teaching like AI creativity since at least 2016, right?
Yeah.
So how have you seen like layperson involvement with AI change over that time? Was there trepidation before like the 2023 ChatGPT explosion? Was it skepticism versus, now obviously I'm sure there's acceptance, even fear.
I think it depends on, how you define layperson. I feel like layperson in this context is kind of like a moving target, because in a
Mhm.
sense you could say that, a layperson is just anyone who doesn't really know about it that much now. And so in that sense, in that very broad sense, there's a lot fewer lay people than there were. Like, it was a really niche thing in 2016, and it was usually like, at that time it was kind of, I would say, a sort of, for most people it was a just, one, it wasn't like the thing that they would focus on, that they usually, maybe they were interactive, they made interactive installations, or they're sort of generative artists, or they make new media art, and AI was kind of this thing that you could use for that, maybe
Mhm.
sometimes for some projects. And now it's kind of subsumed a lot of what people do. People are now AI artists in a sense. And and yeah, I feel like, if you look at the tools of the trade back then, it was really sort of small and ugly, and not particularly, um it was hard to maybe see, I think for most people, hard to see the potential.
Mhm.
I've been sort of like measuring the kind of delta between, every kind of milestone, especially in image generation, for a while. And
Mhm.
so at some point I kind of like extrapolated the deltas and realized, like, wow, I would say we're ahead of schedule from my perspective, but
Yeah, sure.
I definitely could kind of see the writing on the wall. Like, we were sort of like on the way to solving image generation.
Mhm.
And so, it's from there, it's like anyone's kind of guess.
So there's so much to unpack in all of your answers. So I apologize that I can only respond with like one train of thought. Um, what I pulled out that I thought was interesting from there is, I guess, just again how we're defining lay people. Like, that was like the beginning of this thought, right? That the layperson is different in every circumstance. And Vanessa, we had like a brief Twitter interaction earlier today in response to the announcement for this podcast, and you kind of quietly corrected me when I called you like an early AI artist. You said you had much more of a background in traditional art and street art, and I'm wondering, like, when was it that you, in the various aspects of your practice, realized that AI either had the capacity to elevate your work, or that it was accessible enough in a way that you could bring all these different kinds of I don't know, your work and your practice is so varied in the mediums. Like when did AI start to become kind of like an omnipresent part of all of these different projects?
So it happened gradually. I also had this whole transition between traditional arts, like just painting, pure painting, gigantic paintings, to digital fabrication. I started doing digital fabrication in 2015, and that got me closer to media artists, to projection mapping later, and then even studying um, algorithm art, like in historical terms. I was thinking about worldwide patterns. It's a long story. I
Hmm.
first had contact with AI art in 2017 with Deep Dream, which was made by Alex Mardestaff. It's like fascinating artist, researcher. And I saw Jim in 2017 when I was doing a fellowship at NYU. And I thought the topic was fascinating, and I was already interested in using AI mostly for compositions of my paintings. So that was the
Hmm.
idea. But I didn't really touch it much until 2019. That's also when I got closer to Gene.
Hmm.
Uh, and ever since, I guess it's also more of a personal thing, like the fact that we live together, we do a lot of things together. Then Gene is deep into AI, like in a very different way than I guess even most AI artists now. Like he comes from applied mathematics. He's really interested in the research. He's interested in mostly in autonomous, like creating life with AI. And I
Hmm.
find that beautiful from the philosophical perspective. Or I started reading more and more sci-fi, but also speculative science. Like my favorite is actually from the 80s, Hans Moravec. Uh,
Hmm.
Mind Children. He's already talking like so far in advance of what we have as, and that's really inspired me for the Little Martian series, of realizing that like all this knowledge is, it's not even human knowledge. It's like it's deriving from pattern recognition from sensory input. And then like we create, we try to create these formulas, and then and the tools, and then the tools also improve themselves. And it's like a process that goes escalating. And at some point AI is like, especially when we get into computational biology, is like we're changing life. Like this will be new life forms. Like we don't know what's coming, but like the
Hmm.
future is, what we can see is that life, like mutations, or life has been accelerating for a very long time. Just if you think in terms of the spectrum of life on Earth, like
Hmm.
what happened in the last few billion years, or especially in the last 1 million years. So like how can we imagine life in 1 million years from now? And then we realize our limitation.
Hmm.
And in that sense, I think AI is bigger than us. I'm really excited to think like what happens once we start, and that's already happening, like making species hybrids, like more gene editing, or genes that are capable of beings that are capable of editing themselves more in their
Hmm.
own lifetimes. Anyway, it becomes like a gigantic discussion, and it really, I think it started inspiring me from a philosophical and even just being the world perspective, especially after the pandemic. That's when I started the Little Martian series,
Hmm.
uh, just just trying to imagine a future I would like to live in, or a future that that I would be interested in.
Even just like listening to that answer, there's so much about Little Martians in there that is starting to come together like conceptually for me. And I want to talk about each of your like works in a nitty gritty way. And so maybe like starting with Little Martians is the right place. It's like it's about this kind of like evolution to a different state of being, different beings altogether. It's also like a combination of ceramics and photogrammetry, and which I understand to be like 3D object creation from an IRL model. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. And it's narrative, and it all revolves around this like AI nexus. And one of the things that I love about this project is that it is not, you can see in the way these projects, these artworks are coming together. I feel that I can see in them one's own understanding of how AI works. You start, your work is kind of subsumed by the AI naturally. It's such a powerful tool. Then you kind of start to use AI to elevate maybe a single kind of artistry, right? And there starts to be a kind of dance between there. But this real mastery that I'm really interested in, and which I see in Little Martians, is this way of using AI not to evolve something, but to kind of like it almost like creates a Z axis, right? It connects a bunch of things that are unlike or unmarried to begin with, and then creates like a deeper way into all of them using this like in this chamber that all of them bore together. So first of all, I'm sorry for the kind of crackpot metaphor, but can you talk about like that element of a project like Little Martians where you have all these different disconnected kinds of practice that you're using AI to weave together into this one kind of like multimedia output?
Yeah. So Little Martians really is a project that has been evolving organically and still like I think it's still at its infancy.
Mm,
So it started on Mars College. That's another long story, but like we were already in the desert when the pandemic hit.
mm,
So in this place we call Mars. And then I gathered local clay and made a head, which I called a Martian. And it
mm,
was really the stereotype of future humans, right? Or aliens, like this elongated head and just like a head and no body, which is a bit often when we talk about AI, it's just like this alien life or disembodied human, like disembodied consciousness.
mm,
And so I started making these heads, and then I went from the local clay to like other kinds of clays and
mm,
experimenting with all sort of different glazes, and then the 3D scanning, and then I was learning just 3D software, and then I learned that I could do 3D animation, like facial animation, directly from a voice. And Jean was the one who really pushed me into it, because at first I was doing motion capture, but then you get limit by like you have to do all the motion capture yourself. But if you have like AI voice and AI animation, it means that you can create a character as a chatbot, right?
mm,
Which has a specific personality that you just give a few samples of how they should talk. You give some knowledge base, and then you attribute a voice to it, and then you connect the animation model and to the like in the 3D mesh. So
mm,
then you get like this avatar that has it's like a beginning of an avatar with a life of their own. Like I think it's still really early. So it's been evolving from that. And then I thought at first I was thinking more in terms of these future humans that talk about human history, how all of our data eventually feeds a simulation that makes our present accessible for future generations, how like we're leaving so much information about everything that it's possible to reconstruct our time better than the information we have, for example, about ancient Egypt. It's just we have so much detail about the average person life that,
mm,
especially with a more advanced technology, we would be able to retrace like little by little, and even make like several different versions of the person's life. And I
mm,
started getting more and more excited about like simulation theory, or just from the storytelling perspective. But then more recently I got also interested in thinking like, but what about these heads? Were like, what is their future? And also, do they really need to be just floating heads? Why keep the stereotype of the human consciousness with no body?
mm,
And then I got more excited thinking of them more in terms of seeds of life. So like they're little because they're still beginning, and they're just trying to nurture life wherever they go. Like they're actually more of a blend of
mm,
different earth life forms. So they have features from plants, from fungi, from all an AI enhanced human consciousness, and who knows what else. And they just use all the knowledge they have to try to accelerate life in other planets.
mm,
But at the same time, they run the simulation that preserves Earth's memory and imagination. And I thought that could be something really beautiful to imagine, like these beings many years in the future that are kind of looking after us. And to some
mm,
extent, like it's almost as if they are the ancient, like, um, forest spirits. Like they
Yeah.
are the earth spirits, like the rock spirits. Like so it's like thinking of human history almost like a Moebius strip, like the future and the past. It's something, if everything is in a simulation, they time is an illusion or an
Yeah.
origami.
It's so fascinating to me, as a crackpot fiction writer, the idea of just being able to use AI to, for all sorts of things, but being able to have them like act as dialogue generators within like the context of a narrative, within the context of a character. I, I mean, I can't even imagine the possibilities of doing that, nor have I experimented with it nearly enough. This is definitely off topic, so bear with me. Also, I'm nursing a cold, so if I just hack a cough, I'm sorry in advance. Um, so, I was looking through both of your works, and Gene, something that caught my eye was "Why is a Raven Like a Writing Desk?" This like early style transfer piece of yours from like 2016. And I found it astounding. I really enjoyed it for a couple reasons. Like not only because people create things like that today and still kind of seem to be assuming that it's cutting edge, but more so because you could kind of sense in real time like the joy and playfulness that you were feeling in like running these various like interpolative aesthetics through the Alice in Wonderland filter. That, just for those of you who, you should check it out. But Gene's like "Why is a Raven Like a Writing Desk" is again early style transfer of all of these different famous artistic aesthetics applied to a scene from the Alice in Wonderland Disney film. Um, so I love this piece, and I found this joy in it, and I think I don't often find that joy in AI work because the AI so powerfully overtakes the artist that you really can't sense the artist beneath the AI. So I'm curious, just like within your own practice, how do you find the limit between your taste and creativity and that which any given AI model that one uses is going to then foist upon you?
Uh, what do you mean?
Uh,
So
in terms of like your personal touch.
yeah, well, the thing is that when I the all of the things that the sort of the scene, maybe with like all the artists that I chose for it were, I used Picasso and I used Van Gogh and I used sort of all these iconic artists, and doing so was a way of actually uh de-emphasizing the actual like aesthetic or particular style
Mm,
in favor of basically it's like using the most generic, in a sense almost kitsch, that I could find
mhm.
in
Yeah.
order to emphasize the actual process, like what's actually happening here, that the fact that there's this kind of automated style transfer happening. So using sort of the most normal kind of artworks I could find,
Mhm.
and as a way of like not imposing my own kind of aesthetic preferences on it.
But there was a little bit like your choice of Alice in Wonderland of the Raven. Like I think it was really well done in terms of you really feel like this kind of lack of meaning. Like the style is constantly changing, and they're talking about like the tea and nothing, and it's like nothing makes sense. It's
Hmm.
like I and it's like playing just with pop culture too. So I thought I really like how Gene, he loves the technique. He loves what AI is capable of. Like that's his focus. He's not
Mhm.
trying to talk about himself. He wants to like you had this other early works, for example, the Gans you made just on memes. You really like that, like kind of like the memes that just lose meaning, like all these cat
Oh
pictures
yeah,
that
that
had
means.
like things written underneath, but they are like you can't really read anymore. It's like everything's just losing meaning and becoming this blur of never ending latent space of cat memes. And I actually really enjoy these works of yours.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
yeah. Sorry, Gene, please.
No, yeah, go on.
I was just gonna say, like, I think that this is a really pregnant point, which is that, like, especially if you're training your own models, like, the subtext of your own style comes through, even if you're trying to de-emphasize yourself. You chose Alice in Wonderland as your palette, right? You chose Hakusai, you chose Picasso, you chose Tarsila as the aesthetic overlays on top of that, right? So even though you may not presently be there, your choices are, and that comes through in data setting too, especially if you're training your own model. Everything in that model is emblematic of your own style, right? All the influences that you know. So I mean, to me, it's like if you can data set for yourself, you are creating a way for your own style to be kind of irrepressible.
Hmm.
Which I don't know. Yeah, sorry, please.
Yeah, but one thing that I really like about AI is like emphasizing less there are genius and more also the collective intelligence. And that's something that I hope we can get better at. Uh, um, just in terms of, for example, you using a data set that it has contributions for by who knows how many people, by several artists. Like, what if you could list all of them? Like, what if we can think more in terms of a collective creation, or all the people who are working in the open source code? Like it's I as an artist, I'm actually so happy to be able to use other artists like that I admire as part of my creation and highlight them, like try to make them shine also through the creation. Like, it's this pleasure of collaborating, it's this pleasure of being human and creating together that
Mhm.
I would hope like AI could help us highlight that, go back to that. And I also like there are some interesting things happen like nowadays, even with TikTok, there is a bit of this culture of remixing,
Mhm.
and the fact that other people remix your content just makes you more relevant, so you want people to remix. So I would hope like to see that happening more and more, like with AI. And also in the open source world, I find it so beautiful, like the people who share their code and then they just want to see people improving their code. Like, that's the whole point.
Mhm. How long do you think, if ever, we have before any art that's made without AI is seen kind of in its own separate category as like retro or quaint or like traditional?
I don't know if there's gonna be really a very fine distinction like that, because for the most part the category of AI art is going to go away. Like,
Yeah.
the category of internet art was a thing too in the
Mhm.
early 2000s, and now it's not meaningful. And so AI is just going to, it's been around for 80 years. It's not going anywhere. It's just kind of, it's going through a boom right now in terms of like the sort of the topic, is experiencing interest. But in a couple of years, people will be tired of talking about AI, even though the AI will be even more dominant than it is now.
Mhm.
It'll just be normal. And so AI is kind of this vanishing horizon. It's always, everything that sort of, everything that becomes accomplished by AI stops being AI
Mhm.
after the excitement dies down. And so all of this is, and that has an impact on how we categorize things. So I sort of think that it's an ephemeral kind of time.
Sure. Within this boom moment, Gene, like, can you talk about the importance of AI education, especially in creative fields, like getting creatives comfortable or at least knowledgeable about this technology before, it's everywhere and in every single thing?
I feel like, it depends on what you mean by creatives, but certainly like, professional kind of digital creatives that work, for a livelihood in something like, art, design, music, kind of, this kind of stuff. It um it's it first of all, it's a tool that can amplify your creativity. You can draft faster, you can sort of storyboard faster, you can pull in information, you can get ideas. It's like all of this stuff, it really, once right now it's still kind of this moment where the tools are still kind of raw.
Mhm.
Even things that are really polished like Midjourney, it's still pretty raw. Whereas one place where, like, at this point, um, AI has had like a hugely undeniable impact already on a particular profession is coding. So
Mhm.
most not most, but like coders for still like junior level and sort of new coders haven't yet fully adopted this, but people, a lot of coders are basically relying on LLMs to write code for them. Like 50% of my code basically is straight from the mouth of an LLM.
Mm.
And it works out that code was able to be one of the first beneficiaries of this because of how structured it is and so how learnable it kind of is by these
Yeah.
systems. But it's sort of coming for prose and any kind of like writing and image making that you can do. And so all of these creatives, they have an opportunity before them to really level up their skill, because it really, like, it just makes you better at what you do. I'm a better coder, I'm a faster coder than I ever was. And I think it's also true of like digital, graphic designers and sort of digital artists who are making assets for various purposes. Like the ones who have really gotten good at using these tools, they're better at their craft than they were. And it's important for, first of all, it's like, without bullshitting, it's just gonna have a major impact on people's livelihood. So a lot of the sort of like the junior level positions at a lot of these kinds of professions are being sort of taken on by AIs that are being led by the senior level human, sort of in that
Mm.
position. And so it is the case that a lot of this stuff gets automated, and of course then that has impacts on people's professional livelihoods. And so it's worth it's worth maybe for most people taking some time to kind of educate themselves, just even for its own sake, because it's interesting, but also because it has important implications on their kind of viability as a freelancer.
Well, in terms of educating oneself, like I'm always trying to parlay this this podcast that is into practical advice for myself and folks listening. What should I and listeners at all be researching about? Like, where should we begin our education? Like, what is the best, or I guess, what about AI should we be researching right now? Is it open source toolkitting? Is it like, self custodial data sets? Is it some third thing that I'm not, you know, imagining that's important to artists, developers, lay people, etc.?
I think for a start, it's start talking to you know ChatGPT and LLMs. It all depends on sort of this. I think maybe the devil's in the details. Kind of depends on what your goals are, but certainly like the entry point for most people has been trying to do something productive with ChatGPT and kind of beginning to follow what's happening with LLMs. What are people doing with them? What kinds of applications are people sort of trying to create? And then especially if you're a digital creative, professional artist, looking at what people are building for as tools to help you, and trying to see if any of those things actually solve problems for you, or,
Hmm.
or look like they're on the verge of solving problems for you. A lot of them are still kind of very novelty oriented, and so it's hard for people to just peer in for a couple of minutes and then see like, oh wow, that really solves a problem that I have. But it is more tractable to kind of peer in and see like, oh wow, well maybe I could see how this in 1 or 2 generations might be basically doing what I spent all of last week struggling to do.
Hmm.
And then it's like I'm a sort of big believer that if you want to learn something deeply, you don't want to like over plan it and kind of take struggle to kind of decide like, oh, should I install ChatGPT, or should I use ChatGPT or install Llama or any of these things? It's like, if you want to learn something deeply, you just got to spend hours on it. It's sort of like you're gonna waste a lot of time. I've wasted more time than I've done productive things with time, and but it's been sort of part of the process
Hmm.
of like kind of developing an intuition is it really just intuition kind of comes from. It's almost the same as like muscle memory. If you really want to learn something deeply, you just have to engage with it for whatever 10,000 hours, 5,000 hours, and then and it doesn't even matter if it's that productive, especially in the beginning. So for people who want to build things with AI, I think you just have to really you just have to kind of waddle away, and you'll kind of develop intuition for what things save you time and what things don't. And so to get into the weeds, use LLMs if you're interested, if you do a lot of things with sort of digital art, images, sort of media, then looking at these image generation, video generation tools, and trying to just play with them is always a good use of time, I'd say.
Sometimes I find also like good lists of all sort of different AI applications. I'm sure one can dig into Twitter and see a recent one that just like show companies or projects in all sort of different applications, because it's really cool to just see what is happening, like what is
Yeah.
viewed. Like, for example, there is also image to 3D. There are some which is only beginning now. So from one image you can do a good 3D model, or text to 3D, or text to music, text to
Mhm.
sound, or text to voice, and like just figuring out like all sort of different applications, and then realizing like, oh, how that could be useful for whatever one wants to do. There are all sort of different tools for film editing, like for cutting things automatically, for doing color correction automatically, or some kind of a style transfer. And
Mhm.
it's really cool to see like many of the traditional well, not traditional, but
Yeah.
the mainstream digital tools adapting. Like Adobe has been adapting a lot to AI, but then it's like, yeah, I would spend some time just fussing around trying to discover like what is out there.
Mhm. Yeah, well
And every
said.
time you see a project that you like, try to see like, oh, what are the techniques, what other people have done with it, when did it start, just like from one thing I was trying to dig deeper, because then you can even see like a project that at first you think like, wow, this is amazing, and then you dig a little bit more and it's like, oh no, this is totally normal.
Yeah. I think that's incredibly sage advice from you both. I really appreciate it. We should finish up here, but I want to give you both the chance to talk about whatever you have going on, anything you'd like folks listening to know. So why don't you take a moment and tell everyone what you have going on?
Gene?
I'm pretty invested in Eden right now. So we have a team that's building a a whole sort of platform and toolkit for making art, doing things with language models, making chatbots, kind of just a lot of things. We have an SDK, so we're trying to kind of make something that's broadly useful for other application developers. We want to be
Mhm.
able to spin up AI applications as easily as we do React and Flask and those kinds of frameworks, but for AI. And just kind of create more novelty with images and bots and all of that. So that's basically Eden. And then Abraham is
Mhm.
still alive and well, sort of sort of the precursor to Eden, which is this idea of making an autonomous artist. And Abraham is currently making art on Eden every 5 minutes, just creating new art. He's made about 200,000 artworks in the last
Mhm.
year or so, and also sort of occasionally I have big dreams about Abraham, trying to sort of fully decentralize the process of making interesting things, telling interesting stories. We're also playing with sort of tools for kind of filmmaking and storytelling, sort of multimedia versions of these things. And so yeah, most of my kind of productive capacity is put into this big broad toolkit that we're pretty excited about.
Cool. I will, by the way, link Eden and Abraham and all of the projects you guys are working on in the bio for this episode so that people can make sure to actually check this stuff out.
Great.
Um, Yeah, and for myself, like I've been mostly focused on Little Martians.
Mm,
Now I'm developing this new series for Koji, which I'm super excited about. It's gonna be the first time we do something like this. So pretty much, I train Laura. So Laura is a technique in which you, with a few photos, you train a concept. So you pretty much you can insert your character into the image generation, right? Like you can recognize that face or that object. So I train 6 Lauras on 6 of my sculptures, and each one of them has a name, they have a personality, they have a backstory. Like one is in Venus,
mm,
3 are on Mars, one is in a tiny moon of Saturn, the other one is like in a hybrid of asteroid and comet. And they know about each other. So like I've written like the text about uh like a specific text for each one, and there's also commonalities.
mm,
And then I use Eden to create the bots for the characters, and also for the collection. It's like it's all based on Eden, and the people will have the option of choosing a character, choosing if they want a story in physical reality or human imaginarium, which is their simulation, or at
cool.
least like the part of the simulation that humans can understand.
Hmm.
Right, within our limitations.
Yeah.
And and then you choose what kind of story it is, like the genre, if it's comedy, horror, action, la la la. And then like there are 5 options, and then there should be a text input, like we're just asking like what is happening to the little Martian, and the people should be able to say something. And I'm really excited about it because it's a way of doing collaborative storytelling. Like I'm inviting people to give
Yeah.
inputs of like, okay, so I made this world, what do you think should happen in it?
Interesting.
And and then each character, like for each genre, for I have a set of initial image. Many of them are created with Midjourney, some of them are like historical image, for example 16th century linear perspective drawings. And crazy about linear perspective, or like Hieronymus Bosch, or who knows, a
Mm,
variety of image, and which like constrains the aesthetics. And then you see the character in that specific aesthetics for the genre, for for all the choices you made, and a text of the character saying something related
mm.
to the input you've given and their background. So
Wow.
within their way of speaking. So that's like it's a kind of art collaboration that was just simply not possible before, especially at this scale. Like we can do endless of these. Like there is no limits. And it's really cool as an artist, like to be in this position in which you're trying to set up the aesthetics, you're trying to set up the world, and then inviting people like, hey, what do you do with it? Like what is the next step now? Like what is happening in this world? Because I
Mm,
feel like I still have doubts, like what is their physical reality,
yeah.
or like their relationship to the simulation in their future, which I'm not even sure like how distant this future is.
Yeah. It's very fascinating stuff. I'm sure we could spend a whole episode talking about just that, and maybe we should one day, but let's get out of here today. Vanessa, Jean, I appreciate both of you so much. Your insight, your answers, your time. This was fascinating. Gives me a lot to chew on. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everyone listening or watching. If you liked what you heard, please give us a 5-star rating or a review on Apple or Spotify, wherever you're getting this podcast. Please give our Substack a follow for some writing at museumofcrypto.substack.com. You can find Vanessa and Jean on Twitter, and I absolutely think you should. That's at Jean Kogan, Kogan. And then Vanessa is at VA2 Rosa, ROSA. Please check them out. And please come back next week for another MOCA Live podcast episode. So thank you both again so much for being here, and I'll see everyone else real soon.